In the spring of 1944, the Atlantic Wall loomed as a formidable obstacle against the Allied forces who were planning to invade occupied Europe. This extensive network of coastal fortifications was constructed by Nazi Germany on the orders of Adolf Hitler. The wall stretched impressively from Norway in the north all the way down to France, symbolizing Hitler's belief that it could serve as an unyielding shield. The Atlantic Wall was not just a single line of defense. It was made up of a complex system of bunkers, coastal obstacles, mines, and artillery positions. This intricate web was designed to prevent any Allied landings along the various beaches and coastlines. German engineers and soldiers worked tirelessly to fortify the areas they believed could be targets for an invasion, pouring concrete and installing heavy artillery. Each bunker was equipped to withstand air and naval bombardments, making them strongholds where German forces could defend against attackers. The morale among German soldiers was bolstered by the belief that the Atlantic Wall could not be breached. They were trained and prepared, with a sense of duty to protect their homeland from what they viewed as an inevitable invasion. However, as the months passed, Allied forces were not idle. Intelligence, reports, and reconnaissance missions were continuously conducted. The Allies, particularly the United States and Britain, were aware of the challenges presented by the Atlantic Wall, but were equally determined to find a way to break through. This period marked an important stage in the lead-up to D-Day, which would take place on June 6, 1944. The Allies were developing strategies to counter the wall's defenses. Planning involved detailed maps, simulations, and a mix of deception tactics to mislead the Germans about the true location of the impending invasion. The sheer scale of the Atlantic Wall, combined with the tenacity of German forces guarding it, created a sense of tension and anticipation. Both sides were preparing for what would become one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history. The wall stood not only as a physical barrier, but also as a psychological test of will for the forces seeking to break it. As spring continued in 1944, intelligence reports began to circulate among the German command. These reports clearly indicated that the Allies were gearing up for a massive invasion. Many high-ranking officers in the German military, however, remained steadfast in their belief that the Atlantic Wall would keep them safe. They felt confident that it was strong enough to withstand any assault the Allies might attempt. Despite the warnings from intelligence, the German officers dismissed the idea that Allied air power and naval forces would be effective. They believed that the wall's fortifications, with their thick concrete and deep underground bunkers, were nearly impregnable. Some officers even thought that the Allies would be deterred just by the sight of the wall itself. This sense of overconfidence among the German leadership created a dangerous illusion. They focused heavily on the fortifications instead of considering new tactics that the Allies might employ. The generals believed that the ground troops, actively trained for the anticipated defense, would have the skills needed to repel any invasion attempts. Meanwhile, the Allies were interested in more than just a direct attack. They planned a comprehensive strategy that included air raids to weaken German defenses before any landings. Allied forces knew they needed to target the artillery positions and key supply lines to ensure a better chance of success. In the face of this intelligence, the German command's comfort with the wall became a significant risk. As the tension built, the psychological gap widened between the two sides. The Allies were building up their forces, learning from their earlier encounters, while German troops stationed near the wall grew more comfortable with the perception that they were well protected. The German forces didn't realize that the Allies were preparing for a battle that could change the course of the war. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Operation Overlord began. This was one of the largest military operations in history, involving thousands of Allied troops who landed on the beaches of Normandy. The invasion was meticulously planned over many months, with coordination between various branches of the military from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations. As the first waves of soldiers hit the shores, they faced fierce resistance from the German forces entrenched along the Atlantic Wall. The Germans fought bravely, using machine guns, mortars, and snipers to defend their positions. Despite the heavy fire that greeted them, the Allied troops pressed on, demonstrating incredible courage and determination. The beaches where they landed had names that would become famous: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Each beach presented its own challenges and dangers. At Omaha Beach, in particular, many soldiers faced devastating losses as they stormed the shoreline. Yet, they knew that the success of the entire operation depended on breaking through the German defenses. Soldiers moved in groups, helping each other to navigate the chaos. Some used makeshift covers to shield themselves from enemy fire, while others worked together to carry their wounded comrades to safety. As the hours passed, they managed to take some footholds, inching closer to the defenses of the Atlantic Wall. The bravery shown by these men was remarkable. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for the freedom of nations. Supported by naval bombardments and aerial strikes attempting to weaken the German defenses, the Allies fought hard to secure the beachheads. It was a pivotal moment in the war, as they aimed to turn the tide against Nazi Germany and liberate Europe. Despite suffering heavy losses on D-Day, the Allies effectively established a foothold on the beaches of Normandy. Their courage and training paid off as they began pushing through the defenses of the Atlantic Wall. While the wall was heavily fortified, it also had vulnerabilities that the Allies were quick to exploit. In the days leading up to the invasion, Allied commanders had used air and naval bombardments to weaken key positions along the coast. These surprise attacks dulled the strength of the German defenses, creating gaps that the Allied troops could capitalize on. As the soldiers advanced, they quickly made note of these weaknesses and worked to push further inland. The Germans, caught off guard by the intensity of the invasion, struggled to respond effectively. Many German units were still reeling from the bombardments and the initial wave of Allied landings. This disorganization among the enemy forces allowed the Allies to gain ground more rapidly than they had anticipated. Troops from various nations moved together, helping each other over obstacles and coordinating their efforts to maintain momentum. Communication was vital, and the bravery shown by medics and supply troops also played a crucial role as they provided support and reinforcements to those at the front. As the Allies carved a path inland, they began to secure important strategic locations, such as towns and roadways. By doing so, they not only expanded their control, but also gained essential resources and supply lines. Each inch gained was hard-fought, but the determination of the Allied soldiers strengthened their resolve. With each advancement, the hope of liberating Europe from Nazi control grew stronger, and the Allies worked tirelessly to maintain the pressure on German forces, knowing the battle was far from over. As the battle raged on in Normandy, the true fragility of the Atlantic Wall became clearer. German forces, who had been so confident in their defenses, were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer scale and speed of the Allied assault. The initial waves of soldiers had fought hard, but as more troops and equipment arrived, the Allies gained momentum. Within just a few days, the beachhead expanded significantly. Allied troops, now fortified and more organized, began pushing further into occupied France. They took strategic towns and established supply lines, which were vital for sustaining their advance. The Germans, who had expected to hold their ground, found themselves scrambling to adjust their defenses. As the Allied forces moved inland, they faced pockets of resistance, but many German soldiers were demoralized and unprepared for the relentless Allied push. The air support, which had provided crucial cover during the landings, continued to disrupt German reinforcements and movements. Allied planes flew over the battlefield, targeting supply routes and artillery positions, making it harder for the Germans to regroup. This rapid progression into France caught many by surprise. Allied commanders had anticipated challenges, but the level of disarray among German forces suggested that the Atlantic Wall, once seen as an unbreakable barrier, had serious weaknesses. The spirit among the Allied soldiers was high as they moved forward, knowing they were part of a significant turning point in the war. Each victory reinforced their belief that they could drive the Germans out of France. The determination and bravery of the soldiers, combined with the strategic planning behind the invasion, contributed to the Allies' growing success on the battlefield. By the end of June 1944, the Allies had successfully secured Normandy, marking a pivotal moment in World War II. The once unshakable belief in the Atlantic Wall's invincibility had truly shattered. The fortifications that had seemed impenetrable just weeks earlier now lay in ruins, with Allied forces advancing steadily. D-Day had turned out to be much more than just a military success. It was a crucial turning point in the war. The successful establishment of a beachhead in Normandy allowed the Allies to begin the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi control. With each passing day, more troops, equipment, and vital supplies poured into the region, strengthening the Allied presence. As they pushed eastward, towns and cities that had long been under German rule began to be liberated. The joy and relief felt by the local populations showed just how significant this moment was. Many French citizens welcomed the Allies as heroes, celebrating the return of freedom and hope. The shattering of the Atlantic Wall's myth gave the Allied forces renewed motivation and confidence. They had proven that determination, combined with careful planning and coordination, could overcome even the most daunting defenses. The momentum gained in Normandy set the stage for further operations in Europe, as the Allies aimed to push deeper into occupied territories. The success in Normandy also helped to solidify cooperation among the Allies, as they recognized the scale of what they could achieve together. The liberation of Western Europe was now within reach, and they were committed to seeing it through. The events of June 1944 would go down in history as the beginning of the end of Nazi domination in Europe.